Welcome to another episode of Montana Shares, your opportunity to find out about the nonprofits that make our state so great. I'm your host, Bill Crane, and today I have Kim with me from the Pride Foundation. Hi, Kim.
Hi.
So let's just dive into the high-level view. What is the Pride Foundation? What is the work you do?
Absolutely. So Pride Foundation is a regional community foundation. We work in Montana, Idaho, Oregon, Washington, and Alaska. And our goal is to enhance or really inspire giving to expand opportunities and advance full equality for LGBTQ people across the Northwest.
So let's pop in on a question here. Yeah. LGBTQ, which is sort of new for me. Let's deal with each one of them.
Yes. So lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer. And some people use the Q as questioning, but we really do add that Q on as queer, and it's sort of more of an umbrella term for the community. And so some folks don't feel like they fit into, like myself, for instance, I don't feel like I identify as a lesbian or bisexual, but queer feels more comfortable to me in that I'm attracted to people.
Okay.
Sort of. So that's sort of the idea.
And I hate to go into the weeds this quick, but the Q part, the queer part, it's typically been derogatory, and you're sort of taking it back, I gather. What's the sort of the modern aspect of that? Is that basically
Well, that's a very good point, and it's something that we're trying to be really thoughtful about as well, and there's some good conversations out there because there are some folks who do find it to be derogatory and they have a hard time using it for that reason, and especially folks who maybe grew up in the past when things were a lot more difficult and that term was used in a defamatory way. So it's definitely, it depends on your audience and who you're talking to and how you sort of frame it, but it is sort of trying to reclaim it in this empowering way. And there are a lot of folks, especially younger people, who identify as queer more so than lesbian, gay, or bisexual.
Okay, great.
So, yeah.
I love that. Take it back.
Yep. That's right.
Okay, so tell us that we got kind of in the weeds there. Let's go ahead and tell us about the programmatic work that you do.
Sure. So our two big programs are our grants program and then scholarships. So we really try to connect organizations through our grants program. And this last year we were able to award $360,000 to organizations across all 5 states. And here in Montana, we awarded $35,500 to 7 organizations. And this is really, organizations can apply to us if they have, programs and mission statements that align with ours, values that align with ours. And they are looking to do some sort of program that will benefit the LGBTQ community, people of color, people living with HIV, and really just trying to advance our work and our movement. And they also just need to either be a 501c3 or have a fiscal sponsor who is.
Okay.
And so we are able to really sort of help organizations who can't find funding for that kind of work elsewhere. And then we also develop young leaders. And I guess I should say not necessarily young. We have non-traditional students who are going back to school and are either in the community or, as I said, living with HIV and who have other obstacles in their life, like maybe family who won't support them or they've experienced homelessness, things like that. And our program is able to help them to go to school and achieve their educational dreams. And we just finished our scholarship cycle here in Montana, and we were able to award 10 students across the state in the amount of $34,900. And overall, we were able to increase funding by 35%, I believe.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah, so those are our two big programs that we do regularly. Our scholarship cycle opens up in October and ends in January, and then our grant cycle is actually open right now until July 2nd, I believe.
So if someone does want to run something through, they should get on it really quick.
Real quick, real quick.
Okay, so scholarship's pretty straightforward. Let's talk a little bit more about the grants. What type of things do you support, or what excites you when you're writing out checks for grants?
Absolutely. So we really see When we look at our funding, we prioritize it to those who we see as most vulnerable and invisible in our community, and how those also intersect. So folks within our community who are young people, so students in middle school, high school. We also look at older adults, so elder issues, those who may be living in a care facility and can't necessarily speak up for themselves all the time. We also look at people of color. So especially here in Montana, those are folks living in reservation areas and groups doing good work on behalf of them. And transgender people. We have provided grants to several organizations doing good work on behalf of the trans community here in Montana. And so there's one organization that works statewide, and that's the Gender Expansion Project, and they do a conference every other year to really try to train medical providers on how to provide the best care. Because 1 in 4 transgender people actually delay seeking medical care for fear of discrimination. And approximately 50% of transgender people end up educating their own doctors on how to care for them. So we see this conference as really important and have provided funding to them for at least 2 of the years that they've done the conference. And there's a group called NCBI Missoula over in Missoula, but they work statewide, and they do a lot of work empowering young LGBTQ youth who might not have a strong support system otherwise. And other groups, the Flathead Human Rights Coalition up on the Flathead Reservation, we provided a grant to them last year as well to do work with the youth up there on anti-bullying and substance abuse and things like that. So it's sort of across the board, but those are really the issues that are really important to us. And as I said, the intersection of all of those is, I mean, you become even more marginalized if you're like a transgender person of color, then you're facing even more obstacles. So we see that those sorts of programs are even more important.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about the people that support you, your donors, supporters, that like that.
Absolutely. So we have a lot of just individual donors who really see the value in our programs. And honestly, they range from students who are just glad that we're doing the work we are doing. Like I had a young person in high school give us a donation in Great Falls when we had an event there, and she was just happy that we were there because she had experienced bullying, and she gave us all of the money that was in her wallet, you know. And then we have folks within our community, within the LGBT community, also folks within, you know, an organization that advocates for people of color who recognize that we're trying to expand that work and really deepen the level of engagement there. And we have a lot of allies, straight allies who really care deeply about this work and the issue and see that the issue needs attention and needs focus and care very deeply. And so it's really across the board, you know, from age to all kinds of demographics, whether you're in the community, whether you're not. And so it's really just if a person has a vested interest in this work, whether they have a family member who's LGBTQ or they just care about it really intensely. It's really just anyone that really understands the issues facing our community and how we can, you know, continue to focus on that with Pride Foundation's work.
Right. It is a social justice issue.
It is.
And we historically as a country have slowly dealt with social justice issues, you know, the 60s and segregation, those types of things. So I can see the fairly broad-based support just from a significant part of our community that cares about social justice and cares about equality.
And it's really, I mean, as you can imagine right now, there's a lot happening. This year especially has been difficult for our community, and so I think people are sort of stepping up in different ways to ask how they can help. And so I think we are even getting some new donors, even, you know, when times are tough and they recognize that they want to help and they don't know how, and then they see that what our programs do and how they help, then that's sometimes how that happens.
Great. So what are the emerging issues right now for the LGBTQ community in Montana?
So we work on the full range really, and I will say that School safety is a big issue. Approximately 9 out of 10 students report being harassed or bullied at some point if they identify as LGBTQ. Approximately 1 in 4 older adults who are in our community experience discrimination in a care facility. And then, as I said, 1 in 4 transgender people delay health care for fear of that. And approximately 70% of homeless youth who identify as LGBTQ report family rejection as being the #1 reason why they ended up homeless. So there are really a lot of varying issues that sort of intersect the different reasons why we see this work as really important. There's also, as some people know, there's still no laws barring discrimination in employment and housing in Montana. So there's a lot of fear around that, and if somebody doesn't feel safe or feels like they're experiencing something in the workplace, it depends on where you work and how supportive colleagues and bosses are, and whether or not you can say anything or even talk about it. Or even with like same-sex marriage passing, it's whether or not you can even have pictures of your family at work.
Right.
And same with landlords. If you're renting and you're not sure how supportive your landlord might be. It's really just fear and just sort of walking around on eggshells a little bit because of not knowing how safe you really are.
I think there's a bigger, broader issue out there which relates to the fact that we have stereotypes in our mind that says this person is gay or lesbian or something because of how they look.
Right.
And I think there's a lot of discrimination because of those stereotypes on people that probably aren't part of the community at all. I just recently saw a woman with breast cancer who's being discriminated against. She's straight, but because she has sort of masculine features now after mastectomies, people are attacking her. This is so bizarre. So, I mean, there is no image, right?
No, there really isn't. I mean, folks in our community, they have all kinds of expressions, like way that you express yourself, and whether you identify as a man, a woman, or a gender neutral gender, and it's all across the board, and it's really a poor way to try to assess a person is by looking at them. I would say, just try to keep an open mind and have a conversation with somebody and get to know them first. And don't just straight up ask those questions right away. Well,
in a way, it shouldn't even matter.
Right.
I mean, no one ever comes up and says to me, "Are you straight?"
Yeah.
We don't ask that question.
Exactly.
And so I think reciprocating, it doesn't matter.
And that's it's very true, and I think that's what can lead to further mistreatment and ultimately violence. We don't like to talk about it, but it happens, as we've seen recently.
Right.
And sometimes, there was previously hate crimes here in Montana several years ago against 2 men in Missoula that were not, in fact, even gay. But the people who did it thought they looked gay, and so they acted upon them. And so it's just, yes, ultimately it shouldn't matter. But there is, unfortunately, a target on the heads of LGBT people, at times in certain places. And, it is felt more welcoming in certain places at certain times, but I would have to say that right now, overall, there is an overarching sense of fear and uncertainty for our community.
Right.
And I think that will hopefully get better as we heal and sort of move forward as a community and build upon our strength and our resilience. However, when tragedies happen and things like what happened in Orlando happen, it scares people. Because it just reminds people that it could, happen in another place.
And we talked earlier about why is this important now? And then this news event, it is kind of more of a news event than anything. They like to sensationalize it, but that's shown up. But say we'd had this interview before the Orlando shooting. What would your answer have been about why is this important in Montana now?
I would say that it's still been a really difficult year. There are over 100 anti-LGBT bills across the country. One of our reservations here in Montana recently passed a resolution that was very similar to one of those laws. And I think that people are still feeling very uncertain. And there's the over-policing of bathrooms as a result of a lot of these laws. And, you know, since Target came out in support of our community, it was huge, but then there was this sudden horrible backlash. And yeah, it's like people feel like they need to make sure that the right people are going in the right bathroom, when ultimately it shouldn't matter and you should just be able to go to the bathroom.
Yeah, people in general don't like to use the bathrooms in public
Right.
unless they actually need to go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
it's pretty much safe that that's what they need to do. And
Exactly. And so I would say, you know, it's been a difficult year anyway. And even that aside, I would say there are still issues facing our community. Even last year, there are still young people being bullied in school. There are still people being fired from their jobs or being forced out because a supervisor has found out that they're transgender. There's just not a way to really like prove it. You know, we hear stories all the time that's like, my boss is trying to get me fired, he found out I'm trans, you know, and it's all of these things. So it's like there's still this lack of acceptance in our culture, in our society, and I think that, you know, you can't just change laws and expect everything to shift overnight.
Right.
And I think that a lot of what happened last year with the successes of like marriage equality nationwide is what has led to much of the backlash now. And so it's still like moving towards more education and more sort of just welcoming and affirming spaces and trying to talk about these issues in a way that helps people to understand and really like get to know people, like people sharing their stories and just talking about who they are as human beings, so that people can start to recognize that and not look at it as such a political issue.
Right. I think once you humanize what you want to throw people in a box, in a category, and that makes it easy to hate them or whatever the case is. But once you meet one-on-one, those barriers just are much harder to enforce.
Right.
And so I think there is obviously the backlash and the Orlando incident, but I have to believe that there's a certain amount of, you do see a lot of support that comes out of this same event too.
Absolutely.
It says we as a community, there's a significant part of our community that says this is wrong.
Absolutely, and I will say that I've seen a lot of that since Sunday. Even Sunday, Monday, I've received countless messages just from people in my life who are just like, I want you to know that I'm thinking about you, giving you a hug, let me know if you need anything. And then, you know, some folks just reaching out, I think just needing to talk. And whether that, I don't base all of that on my role at Pride Foundation. I just base that on like human being connections. And like people just need to talk to one another and connect and know that we can move forward and build upon the strength, but also that, you know, if we need to talk it through and be sad and angry for a while, then that's okay too, because it's being felt everywhere. And so, but I think that people really come together and know that this is not what we want to be remembered for and known for, and there is an overwhelming amount of support, even here in Montana. I just felt it across our state.
Good.
So
I think that's probably the best thing that we can wrap up on,
Yeah.
is there isn't a lot of overwhelming support in our state and across the country both.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for taking the
Yeah.
opportunity to talk with us.
Absolutely.
And thank you guys for tuning in today. And have a great evening.